How much does Santa pay to park his sleigh? Nothing. It's on the house. Welcome back to another AlphaStar ladder bronze to GM cast. We found the next leg up after unranked, and it does end up being silver MMR. To the bottom right, we have the machine learning AI
AlphaStar.
And their opponents to the top left. He is
Unknown.
Of course, at the time, players had their names in the replays. AlphaStar typed good luck, have fun in the chat while looking like a barcode on the ladder. All of this information was changed for the replays, and a big thank you to the Deepmind team for releasing this. But as we continue the progression check of AlphaStar, I do need to remind everybody watching that this is not going to be a good game. Do not expect a good game. Not at this league and not at this level. One of two things is typically going to happen. Either we've managed to grab an earlier version of AlphaStar where AlphaStar is not as good at Starcraft 2 as it can be, or we've grabbed a version of AlphaStar that will just raffle curb stomp their opponent because they're just making like out of my way, on my way to GM type thing. But it's kind of cool. And I know this isn't going to be for everybody. You know, these aren't the clickbait title videos with epic plays, but it's fascinating for me going back and watching the machine learning, frankly, machine learn. Now, unfortunately, we do know this to be true. The earlier versions of AlphaStar, despite its really good macro, that's the thing, even at its worst, AlphaStar's macro is still one of its strongest points, but even at its worst, or even at its best, excuse me, AlphaStar still struggled with building placement in SimCity, and I think we're seeing a little bit of this here. This first depot was misplaced. AlphaStar now trying to put a second one down, and typically your wall is depot, barracks, depot, creating that nice full wall off. This is far from it. And even the version of AlphaStar that plays at a GM level that goes on and takes on players like Cyril, when it plays, it does do a decent wall in the main, but then does awkward walls outside. So it really does feel like for Terran, SimCity is a much harder concept to grasp. With Protoss, it seemed like AlphaStar got a hold of it pretty easily. And it's had pretty good building placement with Protoss, generally speaking, but not a lot of fancy micro with this Reaper, just some pretty good stutter step out of AlphaStar. A pretty bad grenade, frankly, but even though the Marine here dies, the Reaper should be able to clean this up, and this really should not delay the command center. Best case scenario for Silver player, they kill the SCV there and delay this a little bit. But that actually wasn't too bad of a move. The early pool is not what it used to be. Once upon a time, you go for a pool this early, it's super duper all in. Now, I think red is kind of super duper all in, but for different, very different reasons, and I'll explain that in a moment. But you could open with 6 lings, play drones in a hatchery, and play a normal game out of this. Pros do this all the time. The Reaper not being over here, this could also lead to a really sick Roach all-in. If that Reaper's defending 6 Zerglings over here, then it's not scouting the Roach Warren, which is one of the biggest scouts you need to see as a Terran. But I just mentioned our Silver players kind of gone all in. Not because of a devotion army. You know, an extra 8 lings or whatever on the map right now are not that big of a deal, especially with a bunker up. This is so... Why? That's not even... Why even bother trying to pretend like it's a wall, right? But the reason I say this is because specifically for Zerg, whether you're an AI or a human, you have to drone if you want this game to continue. Our Silver player admittedly overreacted. They put spine crawlers down in their mineral lines, anticipating the Reapers and possibly a Hellion coming across the map after getting punished, trying to punish the command center. So a not terrible idea, but upon realizing that there was no retaliation coming, these should have been canceled and there should have just been more drones made. Instead, our Silver player was trying to cover their mineral lines against an AFK defense. That way they could devote into roaches and likely try and go for an all-in through this effort, since the drones did not work, or excuse me, the Zerglings did not work out. Liberator's on the way, and currently there's not really good anti-air. A Spore Crawler could get the job done in a pinch, or if 3 of these roaches were to become Ravagers, they could corrosive bile down the Liberator, but of course, our red player has a little bit of scouting outside the mouth of the natural, but other than that, has no idea about what's around the map. Now, look, right here, you might justify thinking, yes, that spine crawler was totally worth it, Rifkin. I am a Silver player, and you are wrong. But it really wasn't, because even if those Hellions killed every drone at this base, which at the time I believe was 4 when it entered, that still would have been more cost efficient to have had this spine crawler be a drone mining for the last, like, minute, And furthermore, those Hellions would have still gotten cleaned up by the roaches anyways. I'm not trying to argue with an imaginary person. I'm just saying, like, this is an absolute waste, unfortunately, no matter how you try and paint this picture. And because of this money investment, that is a significant amount of drones that are not in play. We have 19 workers on the field despite trying to go for a third base. I don't know what our silver players' plans are, but I can tell you this much: they won't be able to afford them, whatever they are. Lings dive forward, and frankly, in one tank shot, they get in the dead zone of the tank, and that's pretty cool. That's actually really fast. The Roach is trying to stutter their way up here too, just getting into that area where the tank can't fire back. I love this move out of Silver, but as you can see, AlphaStar's just repairing. This is not a threat. It's a way to take advantage of the weakness of a siege tank, but other than that, not a real threat. As Lings dive forward too, I mean, 2 tanks are out. Even unsieged, these were pretty good for damage. Sieged, obviously, even better because they get splash. Pop, pop! And the Liberator's got the cover there too. AlphaStar playing incredibly defensive, and I guess this kind of works. As Silver player has been trickling Lings down the middle of the map, there's been no drops or further harassment on their side of the field. But again, with this being a lower league play, a lack of execution is hurting Red more than AlphaStar. 48 SCVs to the 22 drones in play. A third base, even if this was for mining or if this was for Larva to build more units with, either way, our Silver player has no money to work with right now. And AlphaStar's taking a third of their own as we speak. This is a really interesting concept because if we go back to what you'll have a lot of coaches tell you for learning StarCraft, you know, if you're like, let's say hypothetically you're learning Terran, typically what you're going to hear them tell you is just build Marines. Don't worry about tanks, don't worry about medevacs, don't worry about doing anything fancy, just learn to build a lot of units. That's step 1 in the learning process, right? Shout out to the Easter egg on this map, by the way. What's up, you little moopies? I hope you're having a good time. Yes, those are called moopies because they are for legal reasons, not Ewoks. You can find these hidden on several of the maps. Anyways, going back to my point of what I was saying earlier, you could, as long as you build enough units, you'll win a game of StarCraft most of the time. There are some exceptions. Obviously, you don't want to walk into a wall of siege tanks or get hit by a psionic storm and not split, but those are really advanced tactics. When it comes down to the basics of what StarCraft 2 is, AlphaStar's doing something right where Silver player's missing a beat. AlphaStar's just continuing to build units. It doesn't matter what type of units are being built, they are just continuing to pump units. So SCVs, Marines, tanks, you name it. Red, on the other hand, has kind of gotten caught up because they started doing 3 different things: building static defense, being aggressive, and then expanding. They spread themselves too thin, and as a consequence, they have neither any money nor an army to fight with. Make no mistake, shy of AlphaStar donating its entire army away, this player is going to lose the game to AlphaStar. But we kind of knew that going into it, right? Silver League wasn't going to measure up against an AI that was programmed to take on at least Masters level players, much less make its way to Grandmaster. So it's, again, not a game of expectations or criticism. It is just watching how AlphaStar handles things. And these drops are reacted to pretty well. They see the queen, they say, nah, I'm not going to drop there. Perhaps going to buy some time and then patiently drop in the main. There is a small blind spot right here where AlphaStar could get in and not be seen, but I don't know if it's about being seen. These aren't Tom Clancy tactics, and they're medevacs. They're looking to drop Marines and get some brute force damage done. Meanwhile, a Ling attack attempts to take place on the other side of the field. However, with siege tanks being sieged, that was never going to work out for Red. When there was 1 tank on the field, sure. Not when there's like 5 or 6. The Marines over here, unfortunately, don't kill that fast enough to save the medevac, and I think AlphaStar doesn't have stim yet. But regardless of not having stim, which is an odd timing to say the least, this did some pretty good damage, and there are stimless drop timings amongst pro players. So not at all abnormal, but everything in this game feels off. Even AlphaStar's macro feels just like a little behind. Like, we're talking about pacing wise, like maybe a minute behind that of like what a pro player would be at this point. Again, not being overly critical, but it is like a 9.5 minute stim pack, so it's going to be a little bit tough to justify that late tech if you lost the battle. Luckily, AlphaStar did not lose the battle. I kind of identified it was outnumbered and outgunned, picked up and pulled back, and a really good decision on AlphaStar's point. Now with this many Marines, it really does feel like we're in A-move territory as stim and +1 are done. It is worth noting our Zerg player got Carapace, but I mean, realistically, this is... I don't mean to be too rude, but this is a laughable army. The 36 army supplied to the 122 of the Terran. To be more specific, 61 Marines versus 26 Zerglings. Marines build 1 at a time, Zerglings build 2 at a time. Just numbers for you folks. Takes care of the hatchery and picks up to dodge the rest of the ground forces. AlphaStar, oh, playing this out so well. Drops over here. I kind of think dropping the high ground may have been better. Yeah, I think AlphaStar is going to realize that too, so picks up to move over. Some predictive corrosive biles. Okay, that's clever out of Silver. But unfortunately, it does not hit the medevacs. The Marines have a really good spot here to the north of the hatchery as well. Lynx won't be easily able to get a full surround. So AlphaStar taking these fights, pick up, drop, move over here, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. A little overstimmed here with some of the Marines, but that's okay. A lot of time to heal these up. Gonna deny Groove Spines and shut down the Hydra Den, both at the same time. That Spine Crawler from earlier gets a kill, 2 to be precise. But of course, while this goes on, the real army moves down the middle of the map. AlphaStar, he's like, this is even my final form. GG. AlphaStar continues to progress down the ladder and takes down the Silver player. Please be sure to like the video if you guys enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.